Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another session of Agile Testing and Automation. Just 1 second. Yeah, so I hope everyone's fine. In our previous session, that was last week, we looked at risk-based testing, test execution, and then test completion. Today, we're stepping into the agile testing world. If you remember that we said we're laying foundation for, and going over some basic testing or fundamental testing activities. So that's what we've been doing up until now. Today, we're stepping into the agile testing world, and we will be looking at a difference between traditional and agile testing and stepping properly into agile testing. So in terms of the differences, I wouldn't dwell too much on that because of the last 5 sessions that we've had, but just to give us some examples, typical examples of differences between traditional and agile testing, which I'll encourage that you keep your eyes peeled for. The more you see the more we explain what agile testing is and look at the principles and activities in agile testing, you will see the difference between that and what we did, what we mentioned, what we talked about previously. So this table here gives us a glimpse of some of the examples of traditional testing in traditional life cycle. So you can see in the traditional testing side, for instance, in waterfall, regression and acceptance testing are carried out only at the end of the whole project. Whereas in Agile, you'll find that regression and acceptance testing is carried out. It says at the end of every iteration. And then traditional testing as well, you'll see that there are longer time frames. Well, longer time frames deliver the large group of features. So you have a long time in traditional testing, and then you deliver the features at the end of the project. Whereas in Agile, we will find that there are shorter iterations which deliver value and working features. Again, in traditional, the scope of requirements is established upfront. I think we looked at some of these things, as I said previously. In Agile testing, we will find that user stories are selected in each iteration. The team commits to these, but I don't want to go too much into the Agile. In traditional as well, you'll find that there's test execution in sequential levels, whereas it's different in Agile. Again, unrecognized technical debts are very likely in traditional testing because, of course, we've got a longer time frame to do delivery. So we only find out, the developers pack a lot of stuff and say, let's just move on because of time. So as I said, I brought this in just to give us something, not to dwell too much on, okay? You will get it in the group chat anyway to go through. I want to move on to Agile Manifesto, I know this is an Agile platform, but just to give us a glimpse, a reminder of what Agile, the Agile Manifesto values are. We've got, it proposes individual interactions over process and tools, working software over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over contract negotiations, and then responding to change over following a plan. So the right-hand side is typical of traditional projects, traditional life cycle. I want to remind us that Agile testing is driven by Agile values and principles. So when you look at this Agile Manifesto values here, the right-hand side would typically represent what the old world, which is traditional testing, will use. Okay, the right-hand side is what are the values that will drive traditional testing, whereas the left-hand side are the Agile Manifesto values, which will drive Agile testing. And then I've also brought, for our benefit, just a glimpse again of, or a reminder of what the principles of Agile software development are. I won't talk about this, but then it's just to remind us quickly in 2 seconds, if you can be magicians and read, you will find, I mean, we know these things anyway. But again, it's just to remind us that Agile testing, again, is driven by these values and principles, okay? So Agile testing, there are certain practices and activities which directly impact Agile testing. And now after this slide, we'll come to what Agile testing actually is. So there are some Agile practices and activities which directly impact Agile testing. And most of these things will ring a bell to most of us anyway. Agile projects, Agile life cycles are typical of shorter iterations. Agile testing embraces whole team approach because of how Agile works. Agile testing is more, it involves more stakeholder engagement. You will also find that in Agile testing, there's early and frequent and quicker feedback loops because of the way Agile works. Again, you will find in Agile testing that there's more use of essential tools for automation and all sorts. Agile encourages that. There's also more effective communication and integrated development and testing activities. That is multi-dimensional skills being shared. So developers and testers will share skills that they have in an Agile team or testing team. And then change management throughout the project is another thing in Agile that really helps in testing. Right, what will testing without Agile values and principles look like? Testers respond in a traditional world. Testing is viewed as a responsibility of testers. So without Agile values, testers' responsibility over team responsibility for quality. And then within the project, you also find without Agile values that testing is a separate phase. If you look at the V model, you see that testing is a phase on its own. Again, some of these things will come up later on in my slides. Then you also find that there's detailed test planning at the start, typical of traditional testing. So without Agile values, again, traditional world, there's detailed test planning at the start, whereas in an Agile world, there's incremental test planning to absorb changes. Again, in a traditional world, you find that we fix defects and releases, whereas in an Agile world, you will find that we release a working component instead of just defects and releases at the end. Again, we specialize in this specialization in traditional testing, whereas in an Agile world, there's multi-dimensional tools. I won't worry too much about these. I'll go over these in my slides again. I'm going to do a lot of repetition today, because just so that by the end of it, we can clearly get a good picture or a stamp of the differences in our mind. So Agile testing, what is Agile testing? It is testing practice for a project using Agile software development methodologies, incorporating techniques and methods, treating development as the customer of testing, and emphasizing the test first design paradigm. So some of these techniques and methods are Scrum, XP. So Agile testing is basically using these Agile techniques, incorporating them in whatever we do in testing. And I like the end bit, which says emphasizing test first design paradigm. And again, as I said, we'll see some of these things throughout the slides as we go along, or throughout future sessions. Okay. To explain better, it's always good to look at principles. A few people have come up with what is deemed as Agile testing principles. But then, whilst I was preparing, I felt more connected, or, I liked that of Elizabeth Henderson more. She's come up with 9 ways or 9 principles to explain, 9 principles of for Agile testing. This Elizabeth Henderson is actually she's a tester developer, and at one point was on the Agile Testing Alliance board. She was a board of director. So she's got a lot of experience in Agile. And I'm going to talk us through how this affects testing, what these principles are all about. So the first principle is that testing moves projects forward. Testing moves projects forward. So typically, again, in a traditional world, traditional testing world, testing is viewed as a quality gate. So you see here that the test analyst is at the back saying, it's got a shield saying, "Fear not, team or project team, I'll protect you." But then Agile testing, or with Agile changing traditional testing to what we call Agile testing today, it requires that we shift our focus, or testing focus shifts to something else, which is, hey, we want the testing to be seen as a helping hand. So the tester here is saying, hey, why don't we do it this way? How about we look at the requirements in a different way, rather than waiting till the end of the cycle or the project life cycle. We want to be involved early. And this for me, engaging testing in this way is the big thing that Agile has brought, the major thing that Agile brings in. We want to be involved at every stage, and this will keep repeating itself. I'll keep reminding us about this throughout the next few sessions, or probably even in this session. Again, the second principle that she talks about is testing is not a phase. Yes, in traditional project life cycles or traditional testing was actually regarded just as a phase. So development was separated from testing. But now testing is more of a way of life in an Agile world. So traditional testing traditional projects do not regard testing as part of what it does. But Agile sees testing as a way of life. It means that Agile teams test continuously throughout the cycle. So testing is no longer a phase. In an Agile team, one of the principles that she's come up with, and which again goes, you can map all these principles to the Agile Manifesto or Agile principles. And one of them is that everyone tests, not just the designated tester. So in an Agile project, on an Agile project, everyone is testing. Requirements are being tested and reviewed. The developers are doing testing. It is testing throughout. We do not leave testing just for testers. Again, did that repeat itself? Again, another principle that she came up with is that shortening feedback loops in Agile testing. I don't know why I've got Agile principles. There should be Agile testing principles, to be fair. So she suggests, one of her principles, Agile testing principles, is that shortening feedback loops. What does that mean? Long gaps between implementing testing increases risks and wastes. So Agile teams want to test early and very often. And we don't wait till the end of the release when testing is completed to get feedback from the customers. You can see from the time development begins through the dates, look at the calendar, goes all the way till the end, rather than before testing gets done, at the end of this release. It is Agile testing gives us a benefit of shorter, because they're shorter sprints, etc. We get feedback. If let's say it's a 2-week sprint, we get feedback in terms of bugs or even negative bugs or missed requirements or anything that is missing can be fed back quickly. So we have the benefit of getting feedback quickly. Then we've got tests represent expectations. We want tests to represent expectations. Of course, if you look at this this drawing here, you see the developer said, "I've found a great bug, which will not work will not run on one of our applications." And then the BA standing there saying, "What gives you the idea or the impression that it is meant to be supported on that platform?" So the developer is probably saying, "This is a scope creep," but because of the way Agile works, tests actually represent expectations. It means that everyone's testing at what time. There's a lot of communication, and it is quite important. The challenge is to find the balance point between testing for implicit expectations and then making up requirements as we go along, rather than making up requirements, okay? The next one is keep the code clean. Another Agile practice requires that code is kept clean. Agile teams, typically, bugs shouldn't, because of the way Agile principles work, we don't want to leave bugs around. We want to keep the code clean. When the code is clean, it means that there'll be less bugs in it. So this requires that this means that Agile principles or disciplines require that bugs are fixed as they are found. There could be bugs in the code that even a test analyst may not find, but because everyone's responsible, everyone's developers are all involved in testing, definitely once the code is clean, there'll be fewer bugs. That's a benefit for testing. And how many more we got? Probably a couple. And then again, another Agile testing principle that she came up with is that lightweight documentation. We want lightweight documentation, or we benefit, Agile testing benefits from the lightweight documentation. Instead of writing, verbose documentary documents, Agile testers capture test ideas in charters for exploratory testing. They leverage We leverage documents for multiple purposes and use reasonable checklists to suggest tests. And yeah, and then focus is on essence of test rather than incidental documents. And probably a couple more principles. She also suggests, or Agile testing principles suggest that done, not just done. What does this mean? When we say we're done, and then this will probably make sense to those who understand Agile more. So one of the definitions of done, when at the end of the product, one of the exit criteria should be that we're done. And Agile testing will insist that done will mean done. So if it is not tested, then we don't know that the implementation matches the expectation. Whereas in a traditional testing project, you could go so far to the end before coming to a place and realizing their issues. And because you're working to timescales, you may just push the product into production anyway, as in making, we may make compromises. Again, here we've got a last one, which says from test last to test driven. Test last to test driven. For me, this is my favorite one. We want to move testing in traditional projects. Testing is the last thing that is done. But then in an Agile project, you will find that testing is moved to the front. So you see at the bottom, we've now got testing at the front before implementation. And that is where you will find TDD, test-driven development, and then acceptance test-driven development, and such practices as that. So this, in practice, is the end of it. The whole idea here is to bring our mind to, or bring us to a place where we can see differences between Agile and traditional testing in this session. That brings me to the end of the session. Thank you. What's coming next? The next session will be looking at more introduction to testing, but focus on the role of tester in an Agile team, and then an Agile tester skills. What skills do you need? And then we'll also be looking at introduction to testing methods like TDD, ATDD, etc. Thank you. I'll now I'll now allow questions and feedback.
Thanks for the session, Eric. Hello, can you hear me?
You're welcome. Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, thank you, Eric. I just want to ask a quick question.
Yes.
When you talked about definition of done, at what stage would that be? Would that be deployment, or would that be testing? Where would definition of done take place?
So definition of done, that will be what that will be testing. Definitely okay. A testing function. Yeah. So you want to define this again. In the traditional side, we did explain. We did explain. We talked about planning, etc. All these are done in Agile testing as well. However, the Scrum team, I don't know whether my session allows me to go deep into Agile, the way Agile Scrum works. I probably have to do that. So the team, remember that testing is now a team function in an Agile world. So the team will have a definition of, the testing will define done as part of the test plan. Cut my long story short. And as part of remember in traditional, we talked about exit criteria. As part of my exit criteria, I will define what done means. Let's say 100% test cases executed. We want 100% priority 1 or severity 1 defects fixed, that sort of thing. So you define all those things and that become your definition of done. And when the Agile team, the team will also have its team definition of done. So testing will feed into that, basically. And the team can say, if testing says it's done, that is part of our definition of done. So yeah, 2 places. Did I answer your question? Was it Kingsley?
Hi, Eric.
Hey, Isaac.
I've got a question for you. So yes. For me, if, talking from a testing perspective, if let's say I as a BA or as a delivery lead, if I have basically put an acceptance criteria together on a ticket,
yes.
What are the stuff are you looking for in that acceptance criteria from a tester's perspective? What are the details that will make your job much more, you'll be able to do a much more efficient job, if you can understand my question?
Yes. So what are the details that will make my, okay.
Yeah, that's what I mean, yeah.
That is part of one of our future stuff that we'll be looking at.
Oh, okay, then hold on to then. That's fine.
Yeah. So good. I'm glad you've mentioned that because I wasn't sure, like this one, the session that I've had, I wasn't sure how much of Agile stuff to bring in or not, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But you asking that question is good for me because it gives me some feedback. It confirms whether to bring stuff like that in or not, or just go test heavy. So good, okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, thanks a lot, Eric.
You're welcome. Hello.
Good afternoon, Eric.
Yes, sir. Can you speak up, please? I can't hear you properly. Or somebody?
Yeah.
I'm sure someone said good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can now.
Sorry, I'm new and I just joined now because I've not been having time because work schedule.
Right.
I just want to ask, is it possible that one can get the material you use in teaching so that if one misses the class, he or she can go back to read them?
Yeah, they're always recorded, and I think what we normally do is put slides, PDF version of it on the platform as well.
Because
they're always recorded and put on YouTube, so they will be available to you.
Oh, okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So who defines done criteria? That's what we look at. Of the feature. So who defines done criteria of the feature? So if that was that's the question that was asked of the feature, that should be defined by the PO. If the question that was asked, I think Dimola also, yeah. If the question you asked was who defines done of the feature, I would say that should be the PO. Okay, so one feedback I want to get from people is what are some of the things that you want to see in this session? I'm going to move next into looking at, where are we? The role of a tester in an Agile team, and then Agile tester skills, and then introduction to Agile testing methods. But if there's anything in particular, and then later we'll be looking at automation as well. If there's anything in particular that somebody wants, please do let us know so that I'll bring it in, because we've only got about 10 sessions to go. Everyone tests. So you mentioned everyone tests. What tests does the BA conduct? So the BA, that's a good question. Testing, so the BA, basically you want to engage, you want to engage the tester at the point that you're writing your requirements or user stories to make sure that it is testable or not. You want to make sure it is testable. So that I guess that will be the BA's testing. And I've worked with BAs who would bring the test analyst in to make sure that these the stories are, as I said, testable. Any more? Okay, in the absence of any question, I think we get 4 minutes back today. I hope it's been useful. The important thing about today's session was to separate our old world, which is traditional testing, from agile testing, and then just to start looking into the agile testing and some of the principles in it. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. Look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Eric, thank you very much, Mike.
Yes, everybody.